It's not that they don't want kings, it's that they want their kings running the show. The people funding the No Kings protests are minor kings themselves. They are Donald Trump's peers. They are much like Donald Trump. They're probably, billionaires, low-grade billionaires who have lots of money and are still upset by the fact that Donald Trump wields the power that he does. In fact, they are really, really perturbed that somebody as garish and as oafish as Trump has become not only president, but has become a transformational president, that he has really bested Obama and the people that these minor kings really, wanted to use to change the country into the country they wanted. The fact that Trump has basically surpassed all of that, it drives them crazy. And so they're throwing money, that's what they can do, at what they perceive as the problem. What they proceeded to do is create, as Zero Hedge, the publication Zero Hedge put it, they've created what they call it, the unhinged boomer parade. And that is about correct. That's what we saw this weekend. Call it a revolution, call it a counter-revolution, call it a restoration, call it whatever you want. But times have changed massively since Trump came in. Wokeism feels like a bad nightmare at this point. Times have changed quickly. The whole vibe of the country, of the planet, has changed in the past year. There, of course, remain some clingers, some people who still hold to that bygone era. But interestingly, I was made aware of a term that is being used by the youth, and that is a 2020 mentality, as in, somebody who holds, who insists upon, they, them, or, is just overly woke. These people are said to have a 2020 mentality. And I think that's about right. 2020 was a very dark year for the country and the planet as a whole. It was a time where authoritarianism was truly on the march, where masks were wrapped around people's faces and everything seemed topsy-turvy and nothing seemed to make sense. Thankfully, that is in the rearview mirror. The No Kings protests are very much a vestige of the 2020 era. They embody a 2020 mentality. Or, what I like is a colleague of ours, Mike Benz, termed it the coup de flat. Peter Schweitzer, another colleague of ours at the Government Accountability Institute, says that the No Kings protests are funded by what he calls Riot Inc., which is, as we made reference to earlier, it is a vast network of minor kings, with deep pockets that are just funding, left and radically left causes, and they have now for a long time. Who are these organizations? It's, the Soros Network, Tides, which is part of the Soros Network, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Ford Foundation. There are just a ton of them. It's very interesting how, this big money that is also tied into the corporate world is so radically left. It is very interesting, the connection there. So Zero Hedge in their recent piece makes the point that these big groups with just, bottomless, pockets full of money are not mobilizing as effectively as they used to. $1 billion doesn't get you what it used to. Sure, all this money went into the No Kings protests, and sure, it poured out there, it poured out into the streets, and, and it mobilized some, geriatric folks holding up signs and people in Winnie the Pooh costumes and stuff. But what did it do? Did it do anything? Did it change anything? It doesn't feel like it. I mean, one gets the sense that, it feels that the effort has been largely defanged. And we're not saying this as, fans of Donald Trump per se. Okay. It just feels like all of this effort, all of this No Kings thing, and supposedly it's this big giant protest, across the country. It feels weak. And look, we think this is a good thing. Okay. This reflects an increased sophistication in the American body politic. There was a time where, just pouring money into a cause like this could move the needle, and now it just doesn't. People are more sophisticated. People understand the rent-a-protester phenomenon. Now, that's not to say that everybody was at these protests was rented. Without doubt, I'm sure there were some that were. The vast majority, I'm sure, were not, but they were there because of mobilization campaigns funded by very, very rich people indeed, who have their own interests and manipulated people into the streets. So, as far as we're concerned, the fact that it kind of went over like a lead balloon, despite the significant numbers, it represents progress for the American people. But as if to prove that the mainstream left still doesn't quite get what's going on, I read an interesting piece entitled No Kings Isn't Cringe. Well, first off, it is cringe, but what was really interesting is that this woman was arguing, because, so many people have been calling it cringe, that her whole article, and I'll include a link to her article in fairness in the notes. Her whole article is basically making the case that the reason people were calling it cringe was because it was nonviolent and wasn't cool enough, because Antifa was cool. And she didn't really get the fact that the country and, the smart political money has, and I don't mean money really, I mean the people who are doing the thinking these days have left that sort of line of thinking. She doesn't get that. And that's what makes it cringe. It's the fact that those people at No Kings, funded by the Kings, they just don't get it. They're on, as to borrow a phrase from Obama, who probably stole it from somebody else, these people are on the wrong side of history, and they have no idea that they are. Now, saying that, it looks like the socialists in New York City are probably going to end up having a socialist mayor. So that's not to say that the radical far left is completely and totally dead in this country, and things swing back and forth always. But you know what? No Kings was plenty cringe, and it definitely wasn't because it wasn't Antifa enough. Till next time, I'm Nick Sorrentino.